All right. So again, thanks for joining us here today. We've got some a concept and some information and some strategy in the nonprofit sector that we really wanted to share as we bring a new concept to this market. And wanted to make sure that we had some of the nonprofits in our network on the call so they could start to learn about what is happening and how this could have an impact on the nonprofit space and them really moving forward in 2018. So just for today, to level set before we get started, is here are our goals for the webinar. We want to talk to you a little bit about who we are. So Robin and I, and our background in the nonprofit space and why we believe that this concept could be something that's very applicable. We're going to talk about what bank is so that you guys get an understanding. And you can see how it can start to apply. And then we're going to share with you why you should care, right? That's the question of, okay, so how does this apply to me? And we're going to specifically talk about the nonprofit fundraising space and how this directly can apply. And then we want to understand how we can help. So that's going to be our goal for today. Just a reminder, if everyone can please mute themselves, we are getting some background on the call and want to make sure that everyone can hear okay. So just a little bit of background on me. My name is Jamie Adam. I am the CEO of Keystone Strategy Group. My background is 13 years in a Fortune 10 company, a global experience, and I've spent the last 4 years as a CEO of 2 companies, both of which I've built. As an entrepreneur. I'm also a market leader for bank for this concept in the Midwest. I am opening up, along with Robin, the Midwest region for this concept and bringing it to companies, to nonprofits, into the education sector to really help with communication and relationships and help the people flourish right in those relationships. And it really ties back to my why, is that I believe all business, right, and life is about making significant connections with people. And that's what I want to help businesses, nonprofits, education do, because I think that's the way we kind of change the world and the trajectory of where things are going. I'm a business growth expert, so I work specifically with businesses on how to grow. I also do speaking. I'm a nonprofit board coach, so I come in and work. I actually have a number of clients right now in the nonprofit sector that I'm helping from a coaching standpoint on how to take their board to the next level. And I'm also an active board member. So definitely understand this space and can look at it from multiple perspectives. And then I'm going to let Robin come on and introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So as you can see here on the screen, for those of you that don't know, I am a 28-year independent financial advisor. I am an entrepreneur and a volunteer and have experience in all of those areas, along with Jamie, as she said, market leader for bank in the Midwest. My why, along with the significant connections, is also the mission to show all people how to become financially secure. I think that's whether we're a nonprofit or individually, showing people and helping people the steps, the skills, the abilities, all of that it takes to really become financially secure is really important. And for a lot of nonprofits, that's a lot of what we're trying to do with these people, is to be able to allow them to do that. So I'm very passionate about that. Also the business growth expert, the speaker, the coach, and the charity advisor. I can hear somebody typing. Sorry about that. So I'm excited to be able to be here with to share this information with multiple I've worked with multiple nonprofits and do board training, as JB talked about. I have already shared this with a few nonprofit boards, and I'm really delighted at the feedback that we're getting on the application of bank. And, the main questions are around kind of trying to learn about how this could actually be applied day to day. So the next screen, you'll see what we like to kind of start with, which is the definition of sales. So it might be a strange question or a strange beginning maybe to this webinar for people that may not be familiar with bank, but it helps, I think, to get your thought process around this one idea, to kind of take a step back and say, I know we're not on video, but would you classify yourself as a salesperson? So I just want you to think about that. Many people out there today would not necessarily classify themselves in sales, or if we ask people to raise their hands or say, yes, we're in sales, many people do not really like to consider themselves in sales because it has kind of a negative connotation. But actually what we know we do is that we're in sales every day, all day long. We sell the donors, we sell our teams, we sell our staffs, we sell our kids, our family, our communities, really everybody kind of that are around us. We can basically say that we're trying to really sell them, and sales is really the ability to communicate, negotiate, and influence someone else. So I think that's why it's applicable here in the nonprofit world, and that we can all agree that these are some of the nonprofit pain points that we're going to be talking about. Finding new donors, further engaging current donors, marketing or getting out our message, the board of directors. How strong is our board of directors, and how engaged is our board of directors? How diversified is our board of directors? Large corporate gifts and foundations, and then, as I said, our internal team dynamics. These are all really areas that are vital and important to each of you, I know. And as an expert in helping nonprofits raise and run organizations, I know that these are all key. When I started using bank in my financial services business, I realized the impact this simple yet life-changing system could really have for nonprofits as well. And so that's why we're excited to bring this to you. So Jamie is going to take it from here and talk a little bit about the science of the bank.
Thanks, Robin. And, we put this slide in just to get everybody thinking about, as I walk through the science behind what bank is and how it's used as a communication concept and tool, you'll start to see where it can really play into these different pain points. So I want you to be thinking about that as we go through. So a little bit about bank. Bank is strictly an acronym. We get a question. It doesn't have anything to do with a financial institution, but it's an acronym that stands for Blueprint, Action, Nurture, and Knowledge, which is 4 different types of temperaments and people. And we're going to talk through that in a moment. But bank is rooted in the science of personality. So we'll talk about it in a moment, but it's really personality based, because that is a science that has long been proven, and we know that it impacts how people interact, how people make buying decisions, and how people communicate with each other. Bank is also people focused, because the entire concept is built around the fact that every transaction, every interaction that we have is with another human being. And to the extent that we can really understand the science of that interaction, we can increase the likelihood of creating a significant connection with that person. And we know that every opportunity that we have to communicate with them, whether it's to find them as an initial donor or to keep them and retain them as a donor, is really focused on our communication directly with them. And then bank is profit driven. And for most nonprofits, this might seem strange, but in order for your nonprofit to exist, right, to stay alive, is there has to be revenue that's coming in, meaning money that's coming in the door for you to do what you need to do. And this is where we see this being applied to the business sector as well as the nonprofit sector, because again, you're all in sales, you're all selling your cause and what you do. And in order for you to do more and have more of an impact, this is a concept that can really help you create that significant connection. So one of my favorite quotes, and I always start here, this is, I have it in the wall in my office, because I think our world today has become overcomplicated. And it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on or what sector you're in, that we have really overcomplicated a lot of our world and really overcomplicated our communication or lack thereof. And so, Einstein says that any fool can complicate things. It takes a genius to simplify them. And we really look at bank as being something that is genius, because it's taken the science and boiled it down to something that we can use and train ourselves in day to day to communicate better with those key stakeholders in our organizations. So I'm going to walk you through the science behind bank and where it came from so that you can start to understand that. So as I said a little bit earlier, bank is based in personality science. And again, it's an acronym: Blueprint, Action, Nurture, Knowledge. And it's not something new. We did not define personality science. In fact, personality science has been around for 2,500 years. So in 400 BC, Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine, if you've heard about this, developed what he called the theory of the four temperaments. And he studied people. And when he studied people, he realized that all people, the entire human race, could be divided into four temperaments. And when he treated his patients and communicated and gave them what they needed according to their temperament, they healed faster and they didn't come back, right? And so he started to see that there was certain ways that people wanted to be treated, the way they needed information, that really helped them change the way that he was able to treat them. And what's happened in the last 100 years is that so many different assessments have taken this exact same science from Hippocrates, from the theory of the four temperaments, and they've taken that science and they've looked at it from a different lens. And the reason that they've done that is because so many of us really value our personalities, and we value taking these assessments because it tells us more about ourselves. Right? When we're talking to large groups of people, it's rare that there's someone in the room that hasn't taken a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or a color code, right? And the reason being is we like learning about ourselves. When we get that report, we look at it and say, wow, this tells me a lot about myself, right? How did they know that this is who I am? And while all of these assessments are really, really important for self-awareness and to help us understand how we show up in our normal situations in life, what these other assessments don't do is they don't tell us anything about the person sitting across the table from us. And for those of you on the call, that person sitting across the table could be a corporate foundation director, right? It could be a donor, a potential large donor. It could be an existing donor that we're looking to increase, right, our business with and the work that we do with them. And so what happens with this is we understand ourselves really well. But what Bank does that none of these other assessments does is it looks at the person sitting across from you and it teaches you how to take their personality and really understand how that personality plays into how they make buying decisions. And going back to what Robin said in the beginning, when we're reframing the idea of what it really means to sell, because you're all in sales, if you're in a nonprofit, you're selling your cause, people are also buying your cause. So they're not necessarily buying a product, but they are buying what you're doing and the impact that you're having. And so what we look at here is we look at the science of buying behavior and how that impacts how people make buying decisions, why they decide to work with your nonprofit, why they decide to support your nonprofit. And that's really what we're looking at. And that's what the founder of this system developed or really determined, was that none of those other assessments helped us understand what the buyer needs. What information do they need in order to make a buying decision? And what happens is most of us, whether you're in business or you're in nonprofit, is we communicate in one way, right? We communicate in one presentation instead of letting the prospect actually determine our presentation, which is what we should be doing. And so if personality science has been proven for thousands of years, that would tell us that there's 4 different buying behaviors or 4 different personality types in the buying process. But most of us communicate in our primary language. So if you think of the analogy of this being 4 different languages you need to speak, right? If I'm sitting across from someone and I speak English and I know that their primary language is Spanish, how much am I going to get across if I speak to them for an hour about everything I'm passionate about with my nonprofit in English? Right? They're going to hear me. They're going to be able to understand the tone of my voice, but they're maybe going to understand every 4th or 5th word, and they're not going to put the cohesive message together. And that's the same thing that we talk about in buying behavior and in our temperaments, is that we lead with our dominant personality type, right? We assume that others want to hear the information in the way that we want to hear it, which is really incorrect. And science will prove that that's not what people hear. So for example, right, I was in Las Vegas last week speaking to a large organization of people, 50 plus people in the room for a 4-hour workshop. And what happens during that presentation is that 2 people can be sitting right beside each other and hear the exact same words from me and interpret those words and get a different conclusion from those words because of their personality type. Right? Something that's going to resonate for one person, the other person sitting beside them might not even hear that same message. And that's what a lot of this science has proven. And so what we're teaching people is that when you're communicating in your primary dominant style with your donors or with your major connectors, you're missing out and they're only hearing part of what you're saying. But if you're able to really tailor your message and show them, and talk to them in their language, a lot more of what you're trying to do is going to get across. They're going to hear your cause. They're going to hear what you're saying, and they're going to be able to then articulate that, right, to others. And that's what we're getting at here. So what I want to do is I want to walk you very high level through the 4 different types, because I want you to start to see the difference in their buying values and their communication style. And again, we're going to stay really high level for this webinar, and we can have further discussions, when and if you're interested. But what I want you to get out when I talk about these 4 is I want you to start to understand by the end of this that it would be foolish to not start looking at your communication, whether it's your marketing, your newsletters, your in-person meetings with people, to start to tailor your communication according to their style. So the first of the 4 types is the type we call blueprint. Blueprints are more conservative, especially in their buying decisions. They tend to be more inside the box, right? Think about it as low risk, right? They're very conservative, and I want the plan of what's happening. So here are some of the blueprint values that we talk about. And throughout our training programs, we go into detail on how all of these values really show up and what they look like in the buying cycle, in that buying process. But blueprints value things like stability and structure, right? Processes and predictability. So when you're talking about your cause with a blueprint, we teach you that the best thing that you can do is have a really laid out process and how you work with donors, right? The blueprints are going to want to see your financials and where this money is being spent and how you hit or exceeded your budget last year and where you're at on all of that. So they're going to be looking at completely different things than some of the other types might be when they're engaging with your nonprofit and making a decision whether to buy you, right? Whether to do business with you or work with you more intimately. Moving on to the next type is our action personality type. So actions, think of them, if blueprints were inside the box, the actions are very much outside of the box. They do not like to be constrained. They want to be part of something that is really having an impact, really moving things forward, is new and exciting. And you can see that in some of their values. They value things like freedom, flexibility, spontaneity. Right? Just the first 3 values alone here, in compared to the blueprint values that you just saw of systems and structure and process and predictability, the actions want something completely different when they decide if they want to buy and really engage with what you do. And so if we were to use the exact same marketing approach and the exact same script to talk about our business with a blueprint as we do with an action's going to get very bored easily and is not going to feel, they're going to feel like you're too rigid. And again, it might not be that you are rigid. It just might be the person communicating with them is much more structured and focused, where action is looking for something that's a little more exciting and something that's more cutting edge or doing something new and out of the box that others aren't doing. The third personality type is the nurturing personality type. And nurturers are very different from blueprints and are also very different from actions in their dominant style, is that nurturers care more about making a difference than they do about making a dollar. And so for most nonprofits, what we see is we see boards of directors and we see nonprofit executive directors and teams made up of higher nurturing individuals because of the type of work that they're in. They value things like relationship and authenticity, right? A sense of significance and community. So they're very outward facing and what is the impact of the work that I'm doing. But what most nonprofits miss is that many of their donors, while they have a nurturing tendency because they do want to give and they want to help and support nonprofits, many of the donors are actions or blueprints. They're one of the other personality types. And if all of our nonprofits lead with a very heavy nurture message, it's not that other people won't support them or other personality types won't support them, but they may not support it in the same way because they aren't getting spoken to in a way that really resonates and makes them take action. And so for many nonprofits, they have to look to make sure, and this is where I come in and work with boards to say, how diversified is your personality style even within your board, right? Do we have the right people, and do we know how to match those people up with our large potential donors to send the right person to that meeting, right? That can help speak that language of that potential donor and create a really significant relationship with them. The last personality type that we talk about is our knowledge. And so for knowledge, these tend to be some of the more analytical people. They're usually some of the smartest people in the room, but they're the quieter people in the room. Whereas the action, they're gonna say what they feel. The knowledge is gonna internalize what you're saying and internally process it, and probably take a longer time to make a decision, or they may have a lot of questions for you in the buying process, right? As you're talking about your cause or where you need funding. So they value things like learning and intelligence and logic. They also value, being an expert and competence. So they want to work with people that have a high degree of competence in what they do. And with knowledge types, they want to become competent in what your nonprofit does. And so we teach people about the sales tips and the communication tips is that you need to go into a meeting with the knowledge with data and studies that prove, what your nonprofit is doing, that you have data backing up the impact it can have and how you could have more impact if you were able to, create higher funding sources and those types of things. So knowledge are definitely going to want to understand the data behind what you do. So as we lay out these 4 types, you can start to see the difference, right? When we talk about their buying values that have been on the screen, is their buying values are very different. But one thing I want to point out is that the other thing you need to consider is that there's 24 different codes. Their dominant code is what we just talked about, but the other codes matter as well because we're parts of all 4 of these. And the combination of those 4 is really important because when you're working with me or you're trying to sell to me or get me to engage with your nonprofit, it's just as important for you to know if I'm a high blueprint, and that really matters to me, as it is for you to know that I'm a low knowledge. And the science and the studies and the statistics is not what's going to get me. Right? It's not going to help me really understand what you're doing. And so you need to understand both sides of that. And the problem with most of us, again, is we work with just one primary style. And if you were to go through and look at your website and your marketing and your communication style today, it probably takes on the tone of whoever is writing it. And it may not be speaking to the other 4 types. And that's where a lot of that is missing. And the biggest issue here is that, any one of us has about a 4% chance of sitting across the table from someone that has the exact same code as us. And when that happens, magic can happen, right? We feel like we're completing each other's sentences. They really get our cause. Those are the stakeholders that you're like, I wish I had more of them, right? Which is totally fair. But what we tell you is that if you can learn to speak the other languages, you don't need more of people that are just like you. You actually need more of people that are like all 4 types, because those people will be evangelists in the community in different ways for you, right? They will support your organization in different ways. And we don't want just the nurturing type, right? Or just the knowledge type in our organization. And as our donor base, we want to really be able to diversify across all 4 of these types. And then briefly, I wanted to just talk to this equation. And again, for nonprofits, you're going to look at it and say, well, sales, right? It's a sales velocity equation. But I want to talk through why I think this is really impactful in the nonprofit sector. And so this is an equation actually that Salesforce.com developed. And it talks about the different factors that you can really use to increase your sales, right? Increase your fundraising. Think about it in those terms. The first piece is the number of sales opportunities that you work, right? So we look at this and say, if I'm a really engaged stakeholder in your nonprofit, right, in every communication that I have with you, anybody in your staff or on your board that engages with me, I feel like gets me, and communicates to me in a way I can understand, I'm going to create a more significant relationship with you and with your nonprofit. And when that happens, I'm likely to tell more people about what you're doing and the cause and the impact that it's having. But again, the way I would communicate that to a blueprint is very different than the way I would communicate it to a nurture, because they need to hear different things for them to really understand the work that you're doing. But when you do that, I talk about the funnel, is it increases that funnel of people that are engaged with your nonprofit, because you have a whole army of people that are referring people to you and are bringing people to events, right? And are making sure that they're spreading the good word about what you're doing. The second factor is the deal value. And so in typical sales, this is, increasing the amount that you're selling to someone. But from a nonprofit sector, it's increasing the amount that you're receiving from one single donor. So if you're able to communicate to that donor and share on your services that your organization provides, and really get them to understand that, the chances of them giving more than they were originally expecting is very high, because they feel very deeply connected and they feel like they understand what you do at a much deeper level than just writing a check. And so that's where we really see the big impact here. And then the third factor on the top is win rate. So that just means the number of people that come in, right, as a lead or a potential donor or referral source or connector for your organization. You want to be able to close those people. You want them to be able to understand the mission of what you're doing and engage in that mission in some way. For some, that might be donating. For some, it might be time or service on the board. Whatever it is, you want to be able to communicate to them in a way that really makes sense for them and that they understand. And then the last part of the equation on the bottom is the length of the sales cycle. So when we talk about the length of the sales cycle, my guess is the majority of nonprofits don't actually think about their sales cycle, right? How many times do they have to engage with someone, a potential donor, before that person makes a decision, whether or not it's a good fit for them, whether or not they want to donate or support in some way? And for most of you, at least the nonprofits I work with, you work very lean, right? You don't have an overabundance of resources, time and money and people. And when you're working lean, you have to work smart. So what we encourage them to do is to really understand this concept, so that when you meet with a prospective donor, the very first meeting, you already know what they need to know about your services. So if they're a high K, you know that in meeting one, you need to sit down with them and bring stats and data about the impact that your organization is having, about the impact that your services have, right? They're going to want to see that. Whereas if someone is high nurturer, they might not care about the statistics. They want to understand just the impact you're having in the community and in the lives of the people that you serve. So it's a very different message. And if you could know that ahead of time and go into the meeting, that first meeting prepared, we know that it's going to shorten the length of the sales cycle, therefore allowing you to have more time to find more donors, right? And increase your impact and your reach. So that's why we talk about this equation with nonprofits, because we do think it's important, and it's important for you to think about it in terms of where you're weak and where you're strong as an organization, because it may not be in all of these different factors. So for fun here, I just did some quick scripting, right? Really related to nonprofits. And you can see 4 different scripts on the screen, and I'm just going to touch on each one. There's a lot of words on the screen, but I want you to see how different the terminology and the wording is. And this is just in the initial conversation with someone who's engaging with your nonprofit. And then I want you, just on your own, to guess what you think, which each of these scripts is actually scripted towards which type, right? Which of the 4 codes. So the first script talks about an exciting opportunity we have to make a huge difference in the lives of people, right? We're bringing on some of the top corporations in a fun and high-class event, and we'd love to have you join us as one of our premier donors. When we use that type of language, we are talking to the action style, the action personality type. So again, you see words like exciting, right? Fun, high class. Those are all things that make the action's brain turn on to where they're listening now to everything else that you say. Now let's look at the next script. right? We're talking about being a 20-year veteran of nonprofit industry. We have served our community for over 50 years, and we have a duty and responsibility to provide a structured process to help our donors, right? Our staff is experienced, stable, and takes pride in providing our donors with the details of the program so they can make a well-informed decision, right? Completely, same person, completely different approach to how they're speaking to that person. And this is high blueprint. So if you even just look at these two scripts alone, the second script I just read, if you said that script to an action, they might like you. They might actually believe in your cause. They may not choose to engage with you fully because they see it as boring. No offense to anyone. When you say duty and responsibility, an action personality type immediately goes, yuck. Like, that's not something that's important to me. And so you can start to see how important these scripts and the words that you use throughout your entire, cycle of your business, whether it's in person or it's through your marketing, really matter. So the third script here that we know in this day and age, you have many organizations that you can donate to, right? We value your willingness to learn and do your research on the expertise that we have in solving these issues in our community, right? We appreciate the intelligent owner or donor, right? So you are using words, expertise, intelligent, your willingness to learn. We're talking to the K, personality type. We're telling them that we value what they value. And immediately they're looking at your entire organization differently and saying, wow, they really get me. They're really aligned to my values. I want to engage further with them. And then the final one is talking about creating long-lasting relationships, working hard, right, to help people. We want to earn your trust, and we want to make you confident your donation is part of the solution, right, to really having an impact and significance. So in here, if you realize we aren't really even talking about our process or anything, we're talking about our impact in the community and who we're looking for as donors, and we're talking to the nurture personality type. And so we lay this out, and this is an extreme where you can kind of see the difference in everything that you do and that you say really will resonate with these different types. And the more you can diversify your message and make sure it's speaking to all four, the more you're going to have a broader range of donors that come into your process. And I know, Robin, I'm going to open it up here. I know you've got a lot of experience with the messaging part of helping nonprofits. If there's anything else you want to add around this.
Yeah, this is really the big differentiator as far as, really where my brain, when I learned of Bank a year and a half ago, really started to realize that even when I was just sharing this information over the weekend with a board that I was working with, we looked around the table because everyone knew who was coded and what their codes were. And there were people sitting next to me that were nurture when I was reading the knowledge piece that were, basically going, oh my goodness, if somebody started talking to me like that, I wouldn't resonate at all. And the person across the table that was high knowledge was shaking her head the entire time and really engaging in what I was saying, just by using these examples. So I really believe that it's a huge impact on the people that we're sitting across from, as I said, in any area of life, but particularly in nonprofits. If we could really drive what we're trying to do with those nonprofits, and really match and let them know that we're trying to value what they value, that we think it can make a huge difference.
Great. Thanks, Robin. So what we wanted to do next is we wanted to kind of go into, a more generic fundraising process and kind of help brainstorm with you about where Bank and really altering your message and helping your team understand these four languages could help in the fundraising process. And so again, generically, step one, right, in the fundraising process is making your case and being really specific and purposeful about your actions and goals, being able to communicate your mission, your history, the impact and the services that you provide today and the ones that you want to provide with growth of the nonprofit and support, but communicating that in a way that resonates with all four types, because again, all four types are looking for different things. It also impacts your fundraising approach and plan, how you go forward with fundraising. Who are you going to target and how can you segment? And we're going to talk about segmentation here in just a few minutes, but really being able to segment your audience and understanding what they need to know about your services in order to make a decision. And then the same thing about budget and goals, because for a lot of donors, especially large donors, foundations, they want to understand what your broader goals of the organization are. And they also, the blueprint types and certain codes are going to want to know more about your budget, how you manage your money. Some may not care about that. The nurturers may just care about your cause. The blueprints want to know kind of what's happening behind the scenes. Step 2, where we think this can make an impact, is actually building your fundraising team. So as we talked about, for many nonprofits, you're working lean. You may have people on your team. You may have volunteers. Your board of directors might be part of your fundraising team. How can you make sure that all 4 of these personality types or buying styles are represented on your fundraising team to make sure that your message is coming across and resonating with all 4? We have boards that are even starting to look at, okay, if we have a major donor or we've got a corporation and we know, we'll tell you in a moment how you can find out what the buying style or the buying personality is. We want to make sure we send a blueprint to go meet with the blueprint if we can, or at least have someone that has high blueprint and can speak that language in the meeting, versus if you send me and I have no blueprint or really low blueprint and I'm trying to talk to somebody that's high blueprint, the things I'm going to talk about are completely different. And so we're starting to see boards where they're putting that together and saying this will actually drive our entire fundraising strategy. If we know who we have on our team and we know what the donor is, we're gonna be able to more easily pair that together. The same way with training your fundraising team. So not just creating the fundraising team, but actually training them to speak all 4 languages. So when they go out into the community, they're your best evangelists, right? They're the brand of your nonprofit. And how can they adjust the message or the elevator speech that they give about your products and your services as a nonprofit to anybody that they meet? Whether it's at a networking event or it's in a corporation, like you want to make sure that they are armed with being able to adjust their message in support of you based on who they're speaking to. And then step 3 is kind of sizing up your assets. And when we talk about assets, what are all of those things that you have, those products, those services that you bring to market, and how can you really use that as a differentiator and talk about each of those services and make sure you've got information that you can give people in all 4 types and all 4 codes to really engage with. This is different. What you're doing is different than another organization that I could engage with. And being able to really play on your differentiators in the market. But again, those differentiators have to be written and scripted in a way that resonates with somebody and that code that's sitting across the table from you. Step 4, we talk about exploring funding source prospects. So this is just another way of diversifying, your fundraising avenues and where you currently look for fundraising. And by diversifying the codes that are engaged in your nonprofit, as well as the potential donors, it's going to also open up new doors and new opportunities for funding. And then marketing, which we'll talk about again in a moment with segmentation, is there's a huge opportunity in the nonprofit sector for you to adjust your marketing and actually funnel and segment your base, your supporter base, and send the right information to them that they want to hear about what you're doing and what your goals are and how you're moving forward. So we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. And it really leads itself to understanding your supporter base and understanding deeper than just, are they entrepreneurs or are they corporate people? Are they, what's their median income? It's taking it a step further and saying, you could have 2 40-year-old women with 4 kids that are supporters and they really get your cause, but within those 2 women, they make buying decisions differently, right? So while we could look the same in our statistics, we don't necessarily make decisions in the same way. And that's what we're starting to see with a lot of nonprofits is they're looking and segmenting their population of supporters differently based on how they're looking at their codes. And then the step 6 is setting goals and making sure that we're communicating our goals and where we're going as an organization with each of the 4 types effectively. Because again, they don't all want to hear the same thing. So we're the ones that have to adjust and make sure we're giving them what they need, right, to understand where we're going. And then just a couple of considerations that we work with nonprofits on is, and we've talked about this a little bit, is really thinking about creating marketing collateral in each code. So that if you're going out into the organizations or you're sending people information or sending them, sales sheets or sheets about your services, make sure that they're written differently according to what their code is, or at least making sure that all 4 codes are represented in your marketing collateral. Creating marketing campaigns that appeal to all 4 codes. And I'm going to show you this in just a minute about how we're segmenting this. Thinking about rewriting your donor letters, right? If you know what the donors are, or you think what they potentially are, rewriting the letters to appeal to what their primary code is. And probably one of the biggest things that you can do is with your website and social media, and making sure that, what you're doing out there, you're communicating to all 4 codes, not necessarily at the same time, but you're doing different things to make sure that you're resonating with them and you're drawing in new and different types of personality codes in the work that you're doing. Same thing with your events, thinking through what is a blueprint going to want in this large fundraising event, right? What's going to be important to them when they come to this event? What's an action going to want? Right? And looking at it from all 4 perspectives and saying, we're going to have them all in the room. How do we make sure they are as engaged as possible? Because all of you know that the hardest part is getting them in the room, getting them engaged to have a conversation about what you're doing. And if you get that chance to get them engaged and then you fall short because you don't give them what they need in terms of communication and information about your services, then you've wasted that opportunity and all of that work to get them engaged. So we want to help you make sure that once you get them engaged, that is the start of their relationship with that person. And there's a ton of potential with that person and who they know to really expand your reach of your nonprofit. Robin, anything else you want to add about the fundraising process and your experience?
No, I think this is the other thing that we've been able to talk to a lot of nonprofits around, is really understanding that, let's just take an example of if we have a live event that people are going to, and we're sharing a lot of stories about who's been helped, how that really has a positive impact on some of the people, and then other people, that may or may not be into recognition, but think about some of the people that have come to your events, and maybe they are about recognition. They like to have their company name on the program. They like to be recognized when you're doing the thank yous. And I think that if we really think through that from people that have done a lot of obviously nonprofit and a lot of events, that those are some of the things that the groups that I'm talking to are clearly understanding, I think, in their head of how all of these considerations can really make a big difference on whether people will come back to your event next year based on if they felt satisfied. So Jamie, I agree that the way you're thinking about, the script they're writing, the people that are speaking at your events, maybe you consider having someone from all 4 codes do a piece of the event so that we know that all 4 codes are being represented.
Yep, that's great. And so before we kind of wrap it up here, we quickly wanted to go through, because the next question we always get is, okay, you've now opened my eyes to the fact that I'm not communicating to all 4 types. Now, how do I determine what someone is, right? And that's what the solution that we have and that we're bringing to the market is how do you actually get the code? And so the biggest piece is we've got technology. So we've got 2 options. We've got an online technology, and then we've got tangible cards that we use when you're sitting face to face with someone that you can determine their code. Because our biggest thing around this is there's no manipulation, is we just say, why don't you ask that person? Right? So the best way to get someone's code and to know what's important to them is to ask them. And so many of us just get caught up in I feel like I just need to download a bunch of information and share everything I know with them. And when they really just want us to share what they need, They don't need us to share everything. And so our online system and our online way to crack their code is a digital link that takes 60 seconds for them to tell us what their values are. So they actually order the 4 different types in order of what's most important to them. And online, when they do this, and again, this is just meant to be high level. We can have side conversations with any of you who are interested in seeing a demo of the system. But today was just meant to be really high level so you understood the resources that are out there. When someone cracks their code, when someone takes this quick assessment, what happens is they get sent a report. So think of it like a DISC report or something that tells them more about themselves. So it's kind of your gift to them. And the more important thing is behind the scenes, you, the nonprofit, the subscriber to this online assessment system, gets a report that tells you everything about what's important to that person. Meaning, what are those triggers? What are those things they want to know about? What are the things that you should talk about and you shouldn't talk about? What information are they going to want about your services? And so it gives you all of that information. And for any of you who are interested, we can give you an example of one of these reports behind the scenes. Just reach out to us and you can actually see that what type of report you would get and the information you'd get in that report. And then what it does that's really valuable is it puts it into a CRM behind the scenes. So if you were to go out and say, we have a supporter base today, right? A list of people that have engaged with us in some way. We want to go out to them and say, please take this assessment so that we can understand what's important to you and we can make sure that we're serving you throughout your engagement with our nonprofit, right? What a great message to go out to people and to actually have people say, wow, no other nonprofits that I'm engaged with that actually ask me what's important to me. They just want me to know what's important to them. And what we're seeing is a lot of people are saying, this is how I want to be treated. If I'm going to choose to engage with you, I want you to understand what's important to me. And so when you do that and you send it all out and they do this quick assessment, all of it gets stored in this back-end CRM that shows you the codes, the email address of all of these people, all of these supporters, right, in your database, which allows you to then segment all your marketing. So if you have, 200 supporters that you go out and code, you can start to see that, 40% of our supporters are nurturers, but hey, we've got 25% that are high knowledge. When we start communicating, we should be communicating to those knowledge with stats and studies and the impact that we're having and things we can actually measure because they want quantifiable information. And as you can look at these 4 different on your screen, the 4 different newsletters, there's actually science that would tell you that the pictures that you include are almost more important than the content that you include. So for example, on the far right, you see the K marketing has graphs, right, and charts. For someone that is really low K, they're going to look at that and say, I don't even think I want to read that because that doesn't look interesting to me. But if someone is high action, the one in red, they're going to open up your marketing, right? Open up your newsletter and immediately want to engage more because of the color, because of the pictures. So science would tell you that all of these factors factor into how deep someone engages and what you have to say. And so some of our top clients and some of the nonprofits we're working with are really looking at this and thinking about how this can help really segment the people that are engaging with them and make sure you serve them in the way they want to be served. And then the option that we have, and again, we can send you information, we can have further discussions about this, is to be able to have this assessment and be able to use it for all of your donors. There's a monthly fee to that. And what this actually gives you is it gives you unlimited assessments. So you can send this to 10 people or 10,000 people, get their codes, and then be able to alter your approach based on what their codes are, based on what their buying behaviors are. That subscription also gets your team all access to all of our training, and it's all virtual training online so that you can understand when I engage with a blueprint and I am not high blueprint, how do I engage with them? How do I speak their language? How can I actually learn to adjust my message in the moment when I know that that's what they need, right? That they need that blueprint script or that blueprint approach. So we've got over 50 hours a virtual training in our Platinum subscription that comes along and gets partnered together for $129 a month. So we can provide you all the details on all the training that's within there for anybody that's interested, but we wanted to make sure we let you know that we do have that option. And then I just want to wrap it here so that we can open it up for questions with, when we talk about this bank system and this concept that we're bringing to market, it was originally developed in the realm of sales, right? Helping salespeople to more effectively communicate with their buyers, right? With the potential prospects. And what has happened is this concept is not a sales concept. It's a communication and a relationship concept, because we are seeing people that are using this in relationships with their kids, with their spouses, right? With their community groups that they're involved in. And it's going well beyond sales, which is why we're trying to redefine what it really means to sell. And the really promising piece about this, when we see the tagline for the company is the language of people, right? One world, one language, because we believe that these communication values, they really cross cultures, socioeconomic classes, religions, because fundamentally science will prove that we are all one of these four types. It doesn't matter what our situation is. And we're seeing this expand globally into the Middle East right now at a rapid pace, where companies are signing on because they see that this is a way for our world to start communicating with each other. And so our big, push in the nonprofit sector is we know that we can help nonprofits have a bigger impact in the work that they do by more effectively communicating with their stakeholders. And so that's why we really talk about one world, one language, and that it's much bigger than just sales. It's about how we communicate with everybody that we come in contact with. And so there, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to make sure and this is my contact information. That's my direct cell and my direct email address. We would love to have further discussions more pinpointed at your nonprofit and really think about strategically how this could help, because we do have that experience. But right now, I'd love to open it up for any questions. If there's any, you can also type something in the chat if you have any specific questions.